Hello YouTube, welcome to the people them. Happy Friday. Yes, my name is Yolanda and you are watching Flash Black Friday, where every Friday I will flash black to a revolutionary hero or somebody who is black and has made an impact within the community that is, guess what? Black. So if you're interested in learning about Black history, pause this video right now and go and like and subscribe so that you can get notified every Friday when I upload a new video. Yes. Today I decided to talk about Uncle Tom. Do you know who that is? Have you ever been told that? Don't be an Uncle Tom. Stop. You're acting like an Uncle Tom. What are you, an Uncle Tom? Well, you're about to find out who is Uncle Tom and why shouldn't you be like him. Josiah Henson was born June 15th, 1789 in Port Tobacco, Charles County, Maryland. He spent many of his early years on a farm owned by a man named Francis Newman. Josiah's father was brutally beaten one day for standing up to his slave owner for trying to rape his wife. His father would receive 100 lashes, okay? And on top of that, his right ear was nailed to the whipping post and cut off. I really need to know what kind of world we're sharing with these sick, twisted people. After Francis Newman died, Josiah's family was forced to face the cruel separation to be put up on the auction block, and all of them were separated. Josiah was sold to a tyrant named Rob, where he stayed for a certain amount of time. But because Josiah was the youngest, his mother, who was sold to Mr. Isaac Riley, begged Mr. Riley to purchase her youngest son. When Josiah was just 9 years old, he was beaten until he was unconscious and his eyes were swollen shut, all just for reading a grammar book. 9 years old, really? You must feel like a big man. With age, Josiah became an overseer on a plantation farm in Montgomery County, Maryland. He managed to raise nearly double the amount of crops, and on top of that had a very cheerful and willing labor team, more cheerful than was ever seen on that estate. At the age of 22, Josiah met his wife and they got married, and they ended up having 12 children together. Oh my gosh. I'm like freaking out about even having one, but 12. Oh. In 1825, Mr. Riley fell on a financial hardship as he was sued by his brother. He was so desperate that he cried literal tears to Josiah, and he said, listen, I need you to go and take all of these slaves, these 18 slaves, including your wife and children, and walk, yes, I said walk with them to Kentucky, please. Naturally, of course, Josiah did agree. He was a good person. He didn't really have a choice, but he was a good person. So Josiah gathered the team. So as they journeyed, they passed through Ohio, which was a free state at the time, and many of the blacks urged them to stay. They were like, listen, we're free over here. Y'all can just stay. But Josiah, that was not in him. He wanted to purchase his own freedom. So he was like, I get what you're saying, but I'm gonna do what I said I was gonna do. I'm a man of my word. Now, the other slaves, they probably had little perception of what was going on, especially because they trusted Josiah so much that they were like, you know what, we're going to follow you. As Josiah was older, he reflected upon that moment, carrying all the 18 slaves back into slavery, even though they passed through a free state. When he reflected back, he said, and I quote, I have often had painful doubts as to the propriety of my carrying so many individuals into slavery again, and my consoling reflection has been that I acted as I thought at the time was best. This is why you need to think in the future. You know, anybody thinking that way, you gotta look more down the line, right? So they arrived in Davis County mid-April of 1825, and they arrived at the plantation farm of a man named Amos Riley. Now on this journey, a white minister stopped Josiah and said, hey, I got an idea. ding, you can secretly raise money to purchase your freedom as a preacher. And Josiah said, hey, I'm gonna do that. In September of 1828, Josiah decided that I'm gonna travel back and I'm going to go and see my previous owner and I'm going to try to purchase my freedom. So he arrived back in September and attempted to purchase his freedom from Isaac Riley. So he came, knock, knock, ding dong. Guess what? I'm here. Yes. And you know what I got? I got $350. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to give you a note to say that I owe you another $100 and I'm a free man. Okay. Mr. Riley took that note and he said, oh, so I see what's going on here. All right, $350, that's good. So technically, $450 is your freedom. But you know what? This $100 promise that you gave me, I'm gonna add just not much, just another zero to the end of that, making it $1,000. Now, naturally, of course, everybody's gonna be like, you just robbed me, you cheated me. And of course, that is definitely how Josiah felt. But what really upset Josiah was that he found out that he was going to be resold again to another slave master who lived in New Orleans. He said, that wasn't part of the deal. So he was a little bit upset, of course. So when he returned back to Kentucky, Mr. Amos Riley told his son to, all right, you're gonna take Josiah to New Orleans to be sold. But God was like, we'll see about that. During the trip, Mr. Riley's son actually fell ill. And guess what he caught? Malaria. You don't want to play with that stuff. So he got sick. And they actually had to divert back to Kentucky. Josiah took care of his son the whole entire way back. But he was not appreciated. So when they got back, Henson wasted no time. He took his wife and he took his 4 kids that they had at the time and he cut to freedom. He was like, Now, y'all tried to fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So he cut. And he took his kids. Yeah, he took all of them. And his wife. Yeah, they cut. They tread from Kentucky through Indiana, and on top of that, they stopped off in Ohio again. I'm trying to figure out why they didn't stay, but, you know, they cut. They were fighting exhaustion, hunger, exposure, but they were aided by the Native Americans in the Ohio wilderness. During their journey, a sympathetic boatman actually saw them and decided that, you know what, I'm going to help them. So he sailed them across Lake Erie into Buffalo, New York. Then they crossed over the Niagara River, and guess where they ended up? In Canada. Good old Canada. And they would arrive there October 28th, 1830. Naturally, Josiah would work for 4 years on other farms here, but he was a free man. In 1834, he set up a black settlement. He also served in the Canadian military, having led the Black Militia in the Canadian Rebellion of 1837. In 1841, he purchased 200 acres in the Dawn Township, which was just the neighbor of Kent County. And this would become one of the final stops for the Underground Railroad. Josiah was a natural leader. He was able to organize his connections within the Underground Railroad and to help establish a safe haven for runaway slaves. The Dawn settlement was a sanctuary that sparked a lot of hope within the community. As these runaway slaves, they were able to gain education, secure a future, have a safe home, and even have a happy family. Go Josiah. Josiah had a vision to create a self-sufficient community. And that's why he called it the Dawn Settlement. There they would organize a trade labor school called the British American Institute. Now this town on the 200 acres would eventually reach a population of just over 500 people. Go Josiah. Now in this town, he ran a farm. And he also had a grits mill, and I didn't know what that was. So for those of you who don't know, that is something that grinds grain. I don't know, that's a dude's thing to know, not mine. He also bred horses, and he built a sawmill for high quality black walnut lumber. Now, this sawmill was so good that he would eventually win a medal. Go Josiah. Now, with this lumber, Josiah was exporting to United States as well as Britain. A couple years later, the money was probably good. He purchased another 200 acres for him and his family. Now, at first I was like, 200 acres for your family? I mean, that's good. Like, that's blessed. But then I forgot he had 12 damn children. Like, he probably had grandchildren as well. And like, it's just everybody. Like, 12 times, even if they all had one, it's 24 people. Plus them, 14, 20, 76. Like, like, oh my gosh, the number is just rising. Of course you need the space. Now, over the years, Josiah would return back to United States of America. Now, why did he go back? Honestly, I feel like because of the scenario that happened with the 18 slaves that he brought over to Kentucky, maybe he just felt a little bit, weary of that. So he said, I want to make up for it. So he went back and forth from America to Canada, which was extremely dangerous. But overall, he would free between 118 to 200 slaves. Wow. He brought them under the Underground Railroad and led them to freedom. Yes. Could you do that? Now, Josiah felt that this was a much greater purpose rather than just living out his life in Canada as a free man. I don't blame him. One time when he returned to America, he took a trip to Boston. Josiah befriended a man named Samuel Atkin Elliott, who was a former mayor of Boston and a state legislator. Now, Mr. Samuel was impressed with Josiah's story, so he decided, you know what, I'm gonna write a book about it. I'm gonna pen down your story. And he did just that. Samuel created a memoir, and it was called, and I quote, "The Life of Josiah Henson, formerly a slave, now an inhabitant of Canada, as narrated by himself." And this was published early 1849. Now, this memoir would gain a lot of attention in the abolition reading room in Boston. But somebody else read this book. And on Josiah's way home, he found out that there was a lady who was looking for him. So Josiah said, you know what, I'm going to divert and I'm going to stop by and see this lady who's looking for me. He's brave because back in those days, if a white people is looking for me, sorry, don't trust you. She read his story and decided that she wanted to write one of her own, with a little spin on it. So she wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. Naturally, she wanted about 3-4 book series, but she ended up publishing it in the newspaper, and the subscribers grew nearly 26%. Over 50,000 people were reading this in serial form. And then she eventually published it into a novel containing 2 series. Now, this woman's name was Miss Harriet Beecher Stowe. And her goal for this was to awaken sympathy and feeling for the African American race. And boy, did she hit that target, because the people then was jumping out of their socks, their shoes, their hair, their earrings, their makeup, whatever it was that they could jump out of, they was jumping out of it. Okay? They was mad. She got them mad. She know how to make up mad. Hopefully I don't get a copyright strike for that. But she did know how to make them mad. And she did. So when this novel came out, it shooketh the foundation of America. It shooketh it. And when they read the book, they were like, no, stop. Because I don't know what I do, but let me tell you guys something. This book is fake. It's fabricated. And honestly, I think maybe it's because she was a female. They were like, this book was written with just emotion. This can't be real, just because they were damn well embarrassed because it's true. This book got so much hate that if you were caught buying, selling it, or even reading the damn book, you were either jailed or sentenced to death. Bumba Jesus, because my girl upset the people, them. To upset them mud. October of 1852, Josiah's wife passed away, and then he eventually remarried to a woman named Nancy Gamble. And in 1853, Stowe decided that, you know what, y'all gonna call me a liar, I'm gonna write another book. That's what I'm gonna do. She wrote another book. This one was called The Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin. This book, she presented all of the facts. all of the original facts and the documents that even sparked the story to begin with. And this verified the truth. She's like, y'all gonna call me a liar? Watch this. Hold that. Read it. Exactly. You're lying to yourself. This book was basically just a giant bibliography. And there were real life incidents that was identical to that which was in her book. Now, Stowe spent several pages describing the events, the inspiration for various scenes in Uncle Tom's Cabin. And then she declared, and I quote, "A last instance parallel with that of Uncle Tom is to be found in the published memoirs of the Venerable Josiah Henson, now pastor of the missionary settlement at Dawn in Canada." Stowe wrote in the key, which could be found in the book itself, the key to Uncle Tom's Cabin. Not Uncle Tom's Cabin, but the key, the second book. Listen, okay? She wrote, "The character of Uncle Tom has been objected to as improbable, and yet the writer has received more confirmations of that character from a great variety of sources than any other book." So she said, yeah, hold that. Liar. Liar ass. Within this book, there were significant overlaps between this book and Josiah's actual story and his life. And anybody who was familiar with Josiah could quickly piece them together and be like, yeah, it's true. My girl's telling the truth. Now, in this fictional book, Uncle Tom was murdered for not giving up the whereabouts of 2 female slaves who had run away. He was eventually beaten to death by a man who was also another slave, a black man, named Sambo. Did Josiah receive any money from these books? No, he did not. But he did use the publicity to gain profit in preaching, and he was eventually able to purchase his brother's freedom. Here's where you need to pay attention. So, according to the Library of Congress circulation record, President Abraham Lincoln bore the key to Uncle Tom's Cabin on June 16, 1862, and returned it 43 days later. Now, these days correspond exactly to the time during which he drafted the Emancipation Proclamation. We may never know the effect that Harriet Beecher Stowe's book actually played on Abraham Lincoln, but what we do know is that she used her celebrity status to sway the public's opinion towards emancipation. Now, Abraham Lincoln's Republican Party distributed just over 100,000 copies of this book. But that's what I'm trying to figure out, because they was like, yo, if you read this book, you buy this book, or you sell this book, you're gonna get murdered. But Abraham Lincoln was all of 100,000. Shouldn't he have been murdered 100,000 times? It's not funny, it's just serious. This was a way to stir up the abolitionists. It is said that had there been no Uncle Tom's Cabinet, perhaps there might not be any Abraham Lincoln in the White House. So that book, Josiah's story, really had a major impact. Of course, Lincoln did abolish slavery, and a lot of the people from Dawn settlement ended up moving back to America to live out their lives. I guess they just liked it better. However, Josiah and his family stayed there until their dying days. History itself did not remember Josiah as the kind and helpful, hardworking, passionate, lovable person that he was. And this was because of his connection to this fictional character. But it was not just the book that changed him, because his story was told so passionately by Harriet and as well by Samuel that people had to put a spin to it, right? Because that's what they do. They take something good and they make it bad. So after the publication of Stowe's book, a lot of theater owners adapted the story for the stage, producing talk shows. And that was better known as minstrel shows. This was an inverted version of Josiah's story, of the novel Beecher published. These characters were played by white men in blackface. Tom was a caricature, like an old hunchback with poor English who would happily sell out his own race just to curry some favor with the whites. Even though this novel was one of the best selling, considerably more people went and saw these racist performances than those that read the book. The perversion name of Uncle Tom has stuck ever since. Josiah Henson aka Uncle Tom, the good Uncle Tom, was the first black man to be featured on the Canadian stamp. He was also recognized by the Historic Site and Monument Board of Canada in 1999 as a National Historic Person. There is a federal plaque of him that is located in the Henson family cemetery. Josiah Henson, the real Uncle Tom, died at the beautiful age of 93 years old on May 5th, 1883. Wow. He had one of the largest funerals in Dresden history. Businesses locked down for the day. Churches, the bells rang and the people they sang. Of course they would, it's a funeral. And 50 wagons followed behind the casket right on to the grave site. Thousands of blacks and whites attended this funeral for Mr. Josiah Henson. Rest in peace. The moral of the story is that Josiah never snitched. He never beat anybody, and he was a good guy. So if anybody is going to call you an Uncle Tom, you should be proud and be like, yes, I am an Uncle Tom. I do love my black people. I will give my life for my black people. I will help out my black people. It is Sam Bolt that you do not want to be like, because Sam Bolt was the one who sold out. He was the one, well, in the book, he wasn't an actual person, but he was the one that sold out, and he was the one trying to impress the white folks, and he was the one who beat Josiah to death, and he was the one who you just don't want to be like. So if anybody tells you, oh, don't be an Uncle Tom, be like, that's exactly what I'm gonna be, and what? Thank you guys so much for tuning in on yet another Friday. Sorry that I didn't upload for the last 2 weeks. I definitely did not want to interrupt the election because I was very in tune with it, and on top of that, I had a really bad migraine, so I had to miss out. But I do hope that you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, make sure you go and like and subscribe, and send me a comment if you have an idea of who you want me to talk about. And make sure you remember, have enough courage to start and enough heart to finish. And make sure you guys learn something new when? Every day. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. God bless you. Happy Friday. Enjoy your weekend. And yes, bye.